Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is part 1 of 5 of Inspired Thinking. 34 years ago, I became spiritually awakened. And since then, I've been trying to share how we can bring that sort of awareness into our work, relationships, our health, our family life, and the work we do for the world. And this 5-part series, perfectly timed during the process of the COVID and the lockdown, is a process that is meant to give you insight into how you can go from being motivated in life to being inspired in life. Inspired thinking, what is it? Well, some people demonstrated it for us. So it's not normal thinking. We know that there are some amazing performances and some amazing individuals out there who stepped out of the normal world and became icons of inspired thinking. Now, these people, including Einstein and Usain Bolt and Mother Teresa, are not necessarily people of the maximum IQ or the maximum university graduation thing. But what they were able to do is take what they had and do something extraordinary with it. And the question we're going to try and reverse engineer back into our day-to-day is, how do we emulate the thinking that got them to where they wanted to be, or what they achieved and are still achieving in the case of course, Usain Bolt. So motivated thinking is simply like this. Motivated thinking, you take what your body wants, which is pleasure. It wants to have pleasure and avoid pain. So you take what your body wants, you put that in your mind, and you go forward. So how much more money, how much happier will I be with more money? How much more cheerful will I be with a new relationship? How much more fun will I have with a better job? How much better off will I be traveling on this holiday? How much pleasure? So the person who starts the process of thinking with what will give me the most pleasure in life is starting off with what's called motivated thinking. Now, motivated thinking is the norm, and that's why most people don't achieve anything more than a bunch of pleasure stroke pain, because the realization that is coming to the world, even the people who invented the art of positive thinking, the Positive Thinking Institute, have acknowledged that positive thinking, or the aspiration for it, leads to depression. So there are a lot of us who aspire to do well in the world, but actually use equipment and thinking process that completely sabotages the end goal. The end goal can't be more pleasure than pain, because there's no place on the planet, in fact no place in the universe, that there is more pleasure than pain. So being motivated to achieve by pleasure is an inevitable result and an inevitable destination of burnout, exhaustion, and disappointment. Motivation thinking leads to relationship breakdown, financial breakdown, business breakdown, career sabotage, and it also leads to being very, 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 very lonely in the world. Let's look at the alternative. Inspired thinking. We think, we tell the body what to do, and we go and do it. Now, that's a radical contrast to motivated thinking, which is the body says go and it tells us it wants pleasure. We ask ourselves, how do we get more pleasure? We go off and do. The alternative is we say, what do I want? We tell the body what to do, and then we go and do it. So we, the mind, us, the human mind, becomes the boss, and the body has to be disciplined. Now, this is where it gets pear-shaped, because the body says, I'm hungry, or the body says, I'm tired, or the body says, this is no fun, or the body says, I'm disappointed, or the body has a language and it speaks to the brain, and if the brain follows the body's language, we are doomed, because the body is so limited in its capacity to understand the opportunities in the world that it will bow out of. For example, if I said to you now, visualize a perfect apple, and then think about that beautiful apple and biting into that beautiful apple, your body will start to salivate, if you like apples, of course. And therefore, the body will tell the mind to go and get an apple. So the body has a language to the brain. If I said, here's some poo in my hand, lick that, you'd go, how disgusting. Your tongue starts to taste awful, your throat dries up, and you reject that idea. So the body talks to the brain, and the apple can be a relationship, the apple can be a new job, the apple can be a new sport, the apple can be whatever we think is going to taste really great. And the poo can be where you currently are. It could be the car you've got, it could be the job you've got, it could be anything. And suddenly your body perceives that this thing is not pleasurable, and therefore starts to send a taste into your mouth, which will eventually make you sick. And that's the study of the body mind. But let's move on. So motivated thinking. There are so many things that the mind has to question. What will I do next? And will what I do next give me pleasure? And how does that pleasure that I want to have next impact the thing that I wanted to have last? And ultimately, this sense of motivated thinking leads to confusion. Now, there's another way of thinking, which is the inspired thinking, which is we say, this is what I want, these are the things I want, these are the priorities I want them in, and now body, mind, body, machine, let's go do it. Let's work out how you do that. So we understand that motivated thinking starts with the questioner, you, sitting there going, what do I want? The body is dictating part of that story. What do I want? Well, my body wants pleasure and it wants to avoid pain. So part of my what do I want thinking becomes how do I seek pleasure, avoid pain? But then what also in motivated thinking starts to happen is there's a multitude of voices, because if we're subject to this pleasure pain thing, we're also subject to the influence of what we call the outer voices. Other people, so we start seeking their approval. We start worrying about whether our actions will be positive and negative, pleasureful or painful on others, because we treat others as we treat ourselves. We start questioning where we can go to get more pleasure, because the more approval we get from more different people, the more pleasure we'll get. And therefore we start questioning, how does what I want impact the likability of me, the approval rating of me? How does it get me more liked? And therefore motivational thinking implodes on us. It becomes really confusing, really, really destructive in terms of our self-respect. It becomes destructive in our self-esteem, our self-worth, and ultimately our likability for ourselves, which is really important stuff. So I'm going to say no to it. Inspired thinking has a different process. Inspired thinking asks the universe, it asks the bigger brain of ourselves, the brain that's a little bit bigger than who we are as an individual. It says, what's my bigger purpose? What's my bigger reason for doing this other than myself? Now, by asking that question, we automatically step away from the motivation thinking, which is pleasure, pain, or right and wrong. We step into, what does the world want me to do? What can I do for the world? What is my calling? What is my sense of mission and vision that I feel called to do? It may be building a business. It may be having a career in consulting. It may be whatever, or having a family. But when we step into that big question, we step away from what I want, and therefore we step away from self. And self is driven very much by the body. So the first step in inspired thinking is to ask a bigger question of what I want. Then we ask how. And as soon as you ask how you're going to do something, you've engaged the mind and you've engaged the body in what it needs to do. So the question of how we do things is an intellectual, a mental question, and a really important one, of course. But the question of what am I going to do needs to stay away from the mind and the thinking process of how. And once the mind knows how it needs to do whatever it's being called to do, it tells the body what to do. And that is such an important difference between motivation and inspiration. So for step 2 and part 2 of this series, we're going to talk about finding your inspiration, finding that big what. Have a great day. Bye for now.